Now, former top cop James Ramanjalum has been denied bail for his alleged involvement in the 1.9 million rand SAPS PPE tender fraud case. He appeared at the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court earlier today on charges of theft, fraud, forgery and corruption. Prosecutors argued that Ramanjalum, who was the SAPS supply chain manager, was found in possession of witnesses' personal information upon his arrest. He was also alleged to have plotted to assassinate the investigating team members and prosecution lead. This resulted in his bail being denied. His co-accused, however, businessman Kishen Chetty, was granted bail of 250,000 rand.
As the investigating directorate, we welcome the decision or the outcome by the court, which has denied a former top police official, James Ramanjalam. He will continue to be incarcerated, but what has also taken place is that while the other accused, businessman, Mr. Kishen Chetty, has been granted bail, there are various stringent regulations or stringent bail conditions, rather, that he needs to comply with. This particular matter will return to court on the 29th of March at the Palm Ridge Specialized Crimes Court.
Now, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Gauteng government has spent more than 1 billion rand to build field intensive care hospitals, but only 2 of these hospitals are partially open, with 3 still not having been opened. Let's get more from Mark Heywood, editor of Maverick Citizen. Mark, a very good afternoon to you. You've been following the story very closely, going as far back as 2020, when you found the irregularities in the tendering and construction of these hospitals.
Good afternoon, yes. Well, look, the expenditure on these hospitals, as you said, over 1.2 billion rand so far, actually, and that is just the construction costs, was actually incurred in 2020. And the purpose of this money was supposedly to build 4 new hospitals attached to existing hospitals, which would be there to be able to create increased capacity for the first and then the second and the third wave of COVID-19. At the time that the hospitals were commissioned, they were criticized, including by healthcare workers, because of the technology that they were using, something called alternative building technology, but also many healthcare workers who were in the front line of the COVID-19 response said that that amount of money could in fact have been much better used fixing and improving existing hospital facilities rather than building what was meant to be 1,400 additional beds at these hospitals. And like you said, I've been tracking it since then, and when I made inquiries again just over a week ago, what I discovered is that the building at the Kopanong Hospital has been abandoned, and that costs over 200 million rand. The building at the Jubilee Hospital just outside Pretoria is being partially used. The building at the George Mukari Hospital, also in Pretoria, is still not open. That is meant to be 300 beds. And I guess the best case is the building at Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital, where many of the beds are in use but are now being repurposed at great cost for use as a dental hospital and in future as for oncological treatment. So it does seem to be a terrible waste of money at best, and quite likely it involves corruption as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we listened to Dr. Job Hatla speaking to some of the shocking revelations uncovered at Charlotte Maxeke Hospital. But looking at these hospitals here, what did government have to say about accountability, which is always something that's questioned and not many answers are often given?
Well, from the beginning, and I believe until today, government has defended the construction of these hospitals. Premier Makura has defended the construction of the hospitals. So there really is no accountability. I think that they would prefer if we just turned our eyes elsewhere and pretended that this problem wasn't happening. But, for the very reasons that you've just mentioned, the pressure that exists on Helen Joseph, that exists on Chris Hani Baragwanath, because of the continued closure of Charlotte Maxeke and other hospitals, forces us to ask, well, what is going on? Why so much money? I mean, in the article that I published today, you probably saw, if you look at the existing Kopanong hospital, the old hospital, the roofs are falling off the ceilings. There's no security guard. The hospital looks unsafe and it looks unsanitary. And, a few tens of millions of rand could make a big difference in making these hospitals functional and fit for purpose of healthcare. So I would say there's still no accountability. Where there is some accountability on the horizon is that these contracts are all now being investigated by the Special Investigations Unit. And fortunately, the officials responsible for these hospitals in both the Gauteng Health Department and the Infrastructure Department are now all on precautionary suspension. So perhaps heads are falling of the people who commissioned it, but the executives and people who should have political responsibility continue to wash their hands.
And the interesting part also in your article speaks to the investigation and what has been tracked so far, the same persons of interest and the modus operandi that has been uncovered sort of speaks to a pattern.
Exactly, and those were not my words, those were the words of the acting head of the SIU in Gauteng, in fact. But the modus operandi appears to be that there's a lot of money suddenly floating around, available for literally hundreds of millions, available for COVID-19. There's an opportunity to spend that money and to divert some of that money out of the healthcare system. So as far as I can see, and I looked at this many months ago, and the Auditor General has found the same subsequently, there was no proper tendering process for these ABT hospitals. The costs appear to be enormously inflated. And as I've already said, the costs that we are talking about are not the costs of equipping the hospitals or staffing the hospitals or bringing them into the operation. They're just the construction costs. It's part of the pattern is the pattern that we've seen in relation to PPE, into relation to so-called fogging, etc., which is that there have been billions of rand suddenly made available for this disaster, for this crisis of COVID-19, and cynical and corrupt people inside the system, instead of making those rands go to save lives, have taken advantage of them for personal profit and benefit.
And just perhaps going to what we heard of most of the day today with the Charlotte Maxeke Hospital CEO speaking about, the level of theft happening inside the hospital by hospital staff. Does that come as a surprise?
Well, no, it doesn't, because, we've been warning about it. The healthcare workers in that hospital have been warning about it for many months. Civil society has been warning about it. So the fact that there can have been theft is indicative of negligence by the CEO of that hospital and of the Gauteng Health Department, because they were warned. They knew that this was going to happen. But there appears to be another possible element to this, which is that it also appears that there may be some deliberate sabotage within that hospital by disgruntled people who are now concerned that contracts and tenders are not going where they were first promised, and seem to have an agenda to slow down the bringing of that hospital back online as a crucial center of treatment and care and saving lives. So, Mpo, this is something that we still have to get to the bottom of. It's something that is still being investigated. I'm a little bit sad that it doesn't appear as if the SIU is investigating Charlotte Maxeke Hospital at all at this moment, or any other police and authorities, which I think should be happening, because there's definitely a problem there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a problem with an ailing healthcare system. We see the impact it has on millions of South Africans.
Yes, there is. Our health infrastructure in many places is buckling, and is all I'd like to say now is I think we should all salute our doctors and our nurses and the people who work in the healthcare system. I talk to them every day, and they work in very, very difficult circumstances to continue to provide the best possible care. So the problem is not with the healthcare workers. Our healthcare workers are heroes. The problems are with the administrators and the managers in many parts of the healthcare system who are bringing that system to its knees, despite the fact that, in fact, there's plenty of money in our health system and to fix our healthcare system. The problem at the moment is not, as you can see, if you can suddenly find R1 billion for 4 new hospitals, it's not necessarily the shortage of money, it's what is happening to that money.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Let's leave it there for now. Mark Heywood, editor of Maverick Citizen.